Hurricane Milton has made landfall on the Gulf Coast of Florida. The National Hurricane Center says the eye of the storm has hit the coast near Sarasota, while the U.S. Weather Service has urged those who haven't heeded evacuation orders to now shelter in place. Earlier, tornadoes ripped through the community of Matlacha and other places in southwest Florida, leaving a trail of destruction and debris. Millions of people were earlier told to leave Florida's west coast for their own safety. It's only been 2 weeks since the area was hit hard by the last deadly hurricane. And let's bring in some live images of what it looks like right now. This live feed is coming to us from Fort Myers. As you can see, it's bringing very strong winds and heavy rains. The storm's tornado outbreak is already causing damage, and the storm surge, rising waters on the coasts, is also said to be life-threatening. Hundreds of thousands of people already out of power. Well, deadly storm surges and tornadoes aren't the only hazard facing the U.S. In an address from the White House, President Biden condemned misinformation about hurricane relief efforts, including claims that the government was controlling the weather. Those claims coming from some backers of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Biden called the misinformation un-American. He also...
Fellow Americans looking out for one another. That's America at its very best. That's who we are. So my final message tonight is to the people of Florida and all the impacted states. We've got your back. We've got your back. And Kamala and I will be there for as long as it takes to rescue, recover, and rebuild.
Now let's talk some more about the false information spreading about Hurricane Milton and efforts to help victims of Hurricane Helene 2 weeks ago. Brooke Binkowski is a journalist and disinformation expert. She joins me from San Diego. Brooke, both President Biden and Vice President Harris have denounced rumors about the government's response to the hurricanes. Walk us through some of those rumors.
Well, the rumors are that FEMA is killing people. There are rumors that the Biden administration is refusing to send aid. There are rumors that there's, operatives that are down on the ground in the areas that have been ravaged by hurricanes, particularly Asheville in North Carolina. And many of these are the same rumors and disinformation that you see after any kind of major disaster. And that's because they are specifically being circulated to make people less hopeful and more distrustful of the government.
Now, you mentioned FEMA, that's the Federal Emergency Response Agency. Who exactly is spreading misinformation and disinformation, and why are they doing it?
So what I like to say in this case, before I answer your question, is that the D is for deliberate. This is an actual effort to cause problems on the ground. It is actually a deliberate effort and should be considered an attack. And the people who are spreading this are the global far right. That would be allies of Donald Trump here in the United States, members of the GOP, but also members of the far right and members of the large, unfortunately, group of white supremacists that the United States seems to have. So all of these folks talk to each other online and work on messaging and so on online. And it's there ready to be deployed whenever there's a disaster of some sort. And also, I should not go say this without mentioning the global aspect of it. There are also nations that are hostile to the United States and have been circulating disinformation and propaganda, specifically the Putin administration in Russia in particular, and their allies like Hungary and the Orbán administration, like members of those governments are also circulating disinformation in the United States. They have been. It is a well-documented issue, and it's always much worse when there's a major natural disaster like this.
Does misinformation and disinformation like what you're talking about put people like in Florida right now at a greater risk?
Oh, absolutely, at a huge risk. I mean, I saw something yesterday where there was this evacuation map that was getting circulated. It was very convincing. It looked very real. It was deeply alarming. And it was showing that, if you wanted to evacuate, you needed to go to, several hundred miles away to any one of these neighboring states, and here, the thing is, people get harmed. They get into accidents when they're evacuating like this. They lose things. They panic. They go into extreme emotional states because this is really scary. Fleeing a natural disaster is very frightening. So it causes more confusion. It confuses people when they need to find help. They don't know who to call, and they don't trust their neighbors. They don't trust each other. They don't trust the government, state, city, national. They don't trust anyone. All they trust is themselves and, presumably the stockpile of guns that they have.
So hurting people who are already vulnerable in a vulnerable situation. Journalist and disinformation expert Brooke Binkowski, thanks for your insights.
Thank you very much.
GW reporter Stefan Simons is in Orlando, Florida for us. Stefan, Hurricane Milton has been pulling out some surprises in the last hours, suddenly coming faster than expected, changing paths. What's the latest?
Yeah, hours faster than originally expected. Originally expected to make landfall in the middle of the night here, but of course that didn't pan out. It came 3 to 4 hours earlier and made landfall, as you have described. The impact is quite devastating already where it is making landfall. Again, it is with this storm, surprises and really peculiarities are galore, because here it is the wall, not the wall who is spinning from left to right, but the other way around, who brings the most damage to the coast. 12 million people in Florida overall impacted, 6 million encouraged to evacuate, asked to plead, to begged to evacuate. Most of them, say authorities, have heeded that call and evacuated, went away from the coast, Tampa, Sarasota area, Tampa Bay area, and down south from there, and made it inland. Inland, this is here, Orlando, this is more or less on the other side of the state. But as you can see in the background here, wind gusts are picking up, wind speeds are picking up, and maybe you can see the palm trees bending there, and an increasing amount of rain in sheets coming down, vertical, horizontal, and from every direction. So people here in Orlando, evacuees, and everywhere else in Florida, on the way to the East Coast and away from the West Coast where Milton makes landfall now, took shelter. And of course, here is also now a curfew in place that the authorities say is necessary to keep people really in sight. Now, hunkering down is the motto of the hour, so to speak.
Stefan, you said millions of people were ordered to evacuate. Now authorities are saying it's too late for them to get out if they haven't already. What's facing the people who stayed behind in those areas?
Death. Or the imminent threat of death. People who were in evacuation zones A, B, and C, those are the most, like this is purple, red zones, you have almost no chance of surviving, because this storm brings storm surges of between 8 and 15 feet. That's a lot. The average house in the United States is 14 feet tall. This has a first floor, maybe a second or an attic. And this storm brings a foot above that water surge into inland with category 3 forces of wind. That's 155 miles per hour. This will die down over the time and come here with about between 70 and 120 miles an hour. That's still enough to take roofs off, shingles off, felled trees, down power lines, and so on. And of course, contaminated water, flood water. That's the problem more inland as well as now at the coast. So if you didn't flee, if you didn't evacuate, you're risking your life. You probably have a very, very, very high chance of dying.
And what plans do authorities there in Florida have in place to mitigate the damage?
They can't really do something about the damage, but they can, of course, start their rescue and rescue operations. And that is actually in full swing already. There is thousands of people. There is FEMA, Federal Emergency Agency personnel on hand. There is DOD, Defense Department, Pentagon personnel on hand. The Pentagon alone is securing 1.5 million meals ready to be getting into those zones where people are suffering. 2.5 million gallons of water, drinking water, ready to be shipped or brought into those areas. Of course, utility workers is etc., 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 first responders. Now, they do not get out before winds die down to 45 miles an hour. Why? Because you would endanger those rescue workers, those first responders, EMTs, police, utility workers, etc., etc. Nobody's going to do this. So if you are now in a position that you have to call 911, the emergency call, they pick up and say, okay, we got you, but we can't send anybody out to help you right away. You just have to wait it out. Hopefully that works for you.
Stefan Simons reporting for us in Orlando, Florida. Thank you and stay safe.